Yes, it's two for time again, and the seventh of our must-listen-to shows this year, despite it being a very packed year with the blueprint and all the kinds of other stuff. So this is going to be a real interesting show, and it's called The Vedas Part 2. This is the Truth, Honour and Integrity show. My name's Thomas Williams. Enjoy the show. Following on from our trilogy in August, where we did a piece about the Rus in the expose part of our THI show, and then followed up with From His Story to Our Story plus 20 with the story of the Aryans. The third part was From His Story to Our Story plus 21, and our longest show ever in terms of words and time was the story of the Vedas, Rus and Ers, better known as the Santis. Now this show and a follow-up, yes there will be another one, will go deeper into the machinations of the great race and the heavenly kin. This is about life and the creation of all things, whether beings, planets, plants, suns, galaxies or universes. It will likely trigger past life memories, bring up heavy emotions, embrace them, heal it and let it go. Those not triggered are likely to be soulless entities or hiding behind a false image of themselves like a permanent mask. But now is not the time for false images and masks. Now is the time to shine, create and manifest for the all, not just the self. It is time for us all to remember our past, not just the white race, despite all its pain and brutal truths that will bring. But this is the story of the Rus, the Slavs and Aryans, and we have to tell it, as the media junta will not allow history or truth to be presented. And it's a fantastic, more condensed overview of life, the heavens, the realms and spirituality that should inspire us all. In the first part is the 4 parts of the Karatya. The first Karatya is the beginning, the ultimate creator Rah Maha, the first primordial movements of all creations represented as a tree. And what we think of as the universal tree is just a branch on this super tree. The 13-node diagram, of which Earth is portal 3, the Sun is portal 4, gets referred to as the trees of worlds and or leaf realities. Now if you remember the macabre, Midgard was 3 and the Sun 4, and all those 12 plus 1s are portals. The 13 node is also the 12 plus 1 again. In Karatya 2, birth, the spaces of realities on Midgard are divided out into what are called by the Purun Vedas Prav, Yav and Nav. Karatya 3, the great Asa or battle. These security seals are broken in a gambit to attain knowledge. The lower developed entities attain technology and the invasion of halls of heavenly svargas begin. Midgard's portals shut off for protection, other halls cleared, and Midgard is the final locale of dark encroachment. Karatya 4, the order of worlds, the structures of major and minor dimensions, pointers for dimensional transference and transcendence. And there is a particular passage here that covers how you could have ascended but chose not to. Like I said, we have to tell it because the media junta will not allow history or truth to be presented, and so we will.
Thank you. You're a fantastic audience. Thank you.
The truth is marching on. Well, it certainly is. So we're going to begin with the beginning of Karatya 1 in the summer of the Priestess of Fire on the 576th circle of life from the Great Migration from the Arya, according to the circle of the number god on the day of the 3 moons revered in Asgard of Irie, E-R-I-E. And it says, "Know, children of the great race and descendants of the heavenly race, about the times of old, about the wisdom of the ancient priests preserved, about the beginning of everything known to people, and for future times in Karatya of the light inscribed by Darung Wirit. To the glory of the gods, to the greatness of the family, may you comprehend with your heart the greatness of the world, through what the song of the sorcerer Slavic preserved in the Aryan lineage of Pada will tell." Now, 1. Following the great migration from Arya, according to the circle of our number god, was the summer 83075 from the great migration from Arya, or summer 78,047 from the foundation of Asgard of Irie, which corresponds to the year 26731 before the modern chronology. Now, on the day of the 3 moons is the festival of the 3 moons, on the day when the 3 moons joined in the sky. The construction of Asgard of Irie and the great temple of Anglia, which is the great temple of the sacred primordial fire, was started. And this day is considered the day of the foundation of the holy city of the gods at the confluence of the Irie and Om rivers. Number 3, Asgard of Irie, as God living on earth, and God is a city. The city of the gods on the Irie River, now called Irtish, was built in the summer of 5028 from the Great Migration from the Arya in 104,778 BC. Now, in its place is the modern city of Omsk, which is also located at the confluence of the Om and Irtish rivers, the ancient Slavic called Irie. Now, translated from the ancient Aryan, Irie is white, pure water. Not clear, but white. Some of you in the European recent trip may have heard about that. And from this semantic meaning, the name of the territory appeared, Beloved. 4. Karatya, the sacred texts of spiritual and philosophical treatises and historical narratives written on parchment sheets. 5. Darung was a person endowed with the gift of combining runic images describing the events taking place, able to record the combined image of events in slokas, which were applied to wooden tablets, leather, parchment sheets, karatya, and plates of noble metal, called the santis. All of which sounds like the CDT plates. And yes, the heirs were involved in that. Now, Darung was the chronicler. 6. Pada, or Pard-us, an animal of the cat family, which existed in ancient times on the territory of Russia and was similar in appearance to a snow leopard. Now, once upon a time, or rather when there were no times, there were no worlds and realities. We the people perceived was without incarnation, only the great Rah Maha. He manifested himself in the new reality, and from the perception of the new boundless infinity, illuminated with the great light of joy. And then the infinite new eternity appeared in the new reality born, and an infinite number of its manifestations appeared. And that is how what we humans perceive as the spaces of the worlds of Yav, Nav and Prav appeared. 7. The great Rah Maha, or Brahmo, the primordial single unknowable essence, radiating the life-giving light of joy and the primordial fire of the universe, Anglia, from which all existing universes appeared, as well as all inhabited worlds and realities. And as soon as the great Rah Maha manifested itself into the new reality, a super great absolute something appeared in the infinite new eternity. And since it was not what the great Rah Maha is, the super great absolute something concealed the beginnings of evil. For everything that is imperfect from the highest point of view of the all-perfect is relative evil. And when the great Rah Maha was illuminated by the great light of joy, the great stream of Anglia, the primordial living light poured from him, that is, his breath is ineffable. The unspeakable light poured out and sounded in something great. Now, in overview, this speaks to the Big Bang in essence, the dance between the light bursting forth and leaving behind it a trail of darkness. As beyond every black hole is a white hole. Why is it white? Because of all the light matter coming from the radiant suns being birthed into the new universe. Now it becomes difficult to comprehend or make sense of what came first in relation to the original creation. I would suggest it was the thought. The thought manifested the worlds and realities. But then the great question is, who created the thought? Now we at THI have called this being the source, which in simple word terms is correct. It is the source of everything. The all-knowing, all-seeing, all-life-giving entity that birthed everything. And despite the word birthing, it is neither male nor female, it just is. A primordial mix of light and dark coming together to manifest life and reality. And one could argue the thought is the original collective consciousness. 8. The great stream of Anglia is the life-giving light and the primary fire of the universe, in which the universes and our Uranus Sun system with Midgard Earth appeared. Now at the moment when the primordial living light has departed, at least one peaceful fraction of the line from the great source of Anglia, the primordial living light has ceased to be a part of him, whom we humans call the great Rah Maha. Just as the light from the Uranus Sun or a torch burning is not Uranus Sun or a torch. And what that is stating is the suns are a portion of the original light of creation. They are not separate, but a part of the divine light from the beginning. Now the primordial living light drove before it the haze of the super great absolute something, devoid of divine light, and in some places it permeated it without leaving a trace. That is the void, or the singularity, which is the all or the nothing, depending upon the use of one being or more manifesting something. At that point, it ceases to be devoid of light. And remember, just one candle lights an entire room. Now, in other places, it shone with the brightest light. The great spaces flooded, and farther flowed a stream of the dazzling light. But the farther the primordial living light departed from the One, whom we call Rah Maha, the less bright was the light of Anglia. And more often pushing apart and pushing away the haze of nothingness, the haze of emptiness. In each cluster of primordial living light, a multitude of worlds and realities have appeared, but now far away from the One. His primordial living light has spread for the last time like great clusters. Now in this primordial living light, living beings appeared, for Anglia was the life-giving woman. A part of the primordial living light poured into the deep lows and there mingled with the darkness and haze. Primordial flashes appeared from which our universe and the universes above were born. But everywhere, both at the top and at the bottom, like a blue river, there was a strip of primordial living light, not mixing with haze. That is called the Golden Path, or the Heavenly Irie, the side elevator. From top to bottom in the new reality, different worlds were reflected from the surface of the celestial Irie, and special realities inhabited by special beings developed in them. The higher the realities are, the greater number of senses endowed by the beings who inhabit them. Now, I've spoken of this before, the extra senses. We are told there are 5, but 7 are hidden and activated by your own soul development. Now, from those hidden senses comes the ability to see on a whole different level than the 2 eyes. I would call it inner sight. Now, the chakras are the opposite in terms of numbers, 7 available, but 5 hidden. And once 12 is reached in both cases, the +1 kicks in. Now, in each area of the Golden Path, there was not one reality, but a multitude of different realities, and the beings inhabiting them had the same number of senses. But the feelings of the beings in these realities lying next to each other were very different. Now, such is our infinite new eternity in the new reality, and in it still burn the great clusters of primordial living light, the faint reflection of which our suns are. The primordial living light connected many realities, giving rise to the great trees of the worlds. As branches of the tree were connected by the primordial living light of the leaves, reality with the mighty shining trunks, and the trunks of the world trees were rooted in the infinite new eternity that was generated in the new reality. And they all received the light power from the light waters of the heavenly Irie. And this is how the Irie garden was created, which occupies half of the heavenly Svarga. The great trees of the worlds are the universal world structures. On earth, these universal world structures were embodied in the images of the sacred trees, which are still revered by the white people, Iga or Yggdrasil, oak, birch and ash, etc. And these sacred trees were also personified with the light gods, Yig with the warrior god Odin, oak with the god of the thunderer Perun, birch with the fair-faced larder Theotokos, and ash with the generous Tark Dazdabog. Now you know why they cut down the giant trees. It was to take the energy away from Midgard. Now the memories of which are triggered in people around the world with the first Avatar movie. Many left the theatre crying. And for those who doubt the genetic memory I've put forward in relation to the created meme of racism, those emotions in and after that movie reveals it to be a fact. 10. The celestial Irie is the heavenly Irie, as above so below, and in ancient times was called the golden path of spiritual development. In addition, the heavenly Irie was also called the Milky Way. As above, so below again, just like the white water. Irie also symbolises the river, that in which is order for it to work well, it has to flow. We've spoken about that a lot this year. The path of spiritual development has to flow also in order for that to work as well. Dams make you damned and can lead to being drowned by your own failures to flow in the best way. 11. Viri, sad are heavenly abodes, where the light gods and the wise ancestors of all Slavic Aryan clans lived that now inhabit Midgard earth. Otherwise, there were other limbs in our infinite Anglia existing. The limbs are describing the universal tree from which all universes are birthed. Now, sometime in the past, it was decided this universe had gone too dark and was beginning to infect the tree and other subsequent universes. But some decided it could be saved, and they were called the Renegades, as I understand, and undertook the monumental task to restoring balance within this universe, which would subsequently save the other affected universes and heal the tree. Now there, high at the top, but far from the great Rah Maha, where the great clusters of the primordial living light have spilled out, there are the highest gods, one of whom we call Sarog, and who is the god of the worlds and realities in our infinity. So 12. Sarog is the bright Slavic supreme god who controls heaven and life in our universe. He is responsible for the day and night of the Sarog, a period of time that alternates between light and dark every 1008 years, which also equals a 9. There are more Svarajiches than limbs existing in our infinite Anglia, and those of the light gods who are not the supreme god of limbs are in the shining world of spiritual power. The Svarajichi are infinitely great and powerful in comparison with us, and we can speak of them as the all-perfect, the almighty, the all-good, and also the all-knowing. 13. The world of spiritual power is a multi-dimensional and diverse world located at higher levels of the golden path, compared to the manifest world of Midgard Earth. Now, the dark forces think they can cheat their way into the world of spiritual power by going more dark. They were lied to. The ultimate trick of seducement by choosing the perceived easier path. There is no easier or harder path on the path of spirituality, and by that I mean there are no shortcuts. You attain each level based upon what your efforts, lessons learned, interactions have garnered. There is no cheat code. There is no masking. There is no lying on that level. It is the ultimate truth of where each of you are at based on your applications only. Do the work and progress to no time on the vertical axis, or play backwards and forwards in a perpetual loop of linear time. Your choice. We are right in putting the highest gods above all that is available to us, which we comprehend. But any of the beings living in any of us on the smallest particle revolving around the original base also relates in its power to Sarog, as Sarog refers to the one whom we call the great Rah Maha. Now, every tiny particle of our body, stone, wood, is a kind of solar system, a Uranus sun, surrounded by Earths, on which billions of thinking beings live, sometimes people exceeding in their mental and moral development of us. Sometimes people exceeding in their mental and moral development of us. It's about going beyond the teacher. And that is what soul development can bring to the all. In fact, that is every being's goal, to reach the levels of the gods. 14. Lands are what the Slavs and Aryans call celestial objects, revolving around the central luminary, the sun or the star. Now, we all think the sun is the star, and so I was curious as to why they mentioned them separate, and then found out why. A star is a celestial body around which there is a system consisting of 1 to 7 earths or stars. And that is, there are star systems where several small ones revolve around a large star, and this central luminary is called the star. Now, the sun is a celestial body around which has more than 7 earths revolving. That is, if up to 7 earths revolve around the sun, it is a star, and if 8 or more orbits, it is the sun. And that is why there are star systems and solar systems. And more important than what has been said now, may be that in the infinite new eternity in the new reality born, below is the same boundless, unknowable abyss as above. And what is below is the likeness of what is above. And what is above is the basis for the likeness of what is below, according to the original will of the primordial one, the great Rah Maha. And that is as above, so below, plus so within and so without. And when you overview information or puzzles and apply those memes, things become an awful lot simpler to work out. Karatya 2, Birth. At the source of the summer of the priestess of fire on the 576th circle of life from the great migration from the Arya along the circle of our number god on the day of Vladimir, when the wise priests blessed the sacred family unions between the great families in all the Vesi, V-E-S-I, of the holy race, and in the Asgard of Irie. And on this beautiful evening, hear, children of the great race and descendants of the heavenly race, about the ancient beautiful times, about the ancient wisdom that was preserved by the priests. On the birth of the worlds of Yav, Nav and Prav, and for future times in the Hierarchy of light, which was inscribed by Durung Wirit, having lifted up the glory to all the highest gods and the greatness of the heavenly race, may every heart comprehend the greatness of the worlds. All through the song of the sorcerer Slavic that was preserved in the Aryan kind of Pada will tell. Now, in the true primordial, or rather when in the infinite new eternity, the life-bearing radiant Anglia, the primordial life-generating light, was poured out in the great powerful stream. Now, in the new realities, various spaces and realities of the world of Yav, Nav and Prav were born. Now, the closer to the primordial source of light, these spaces and realities were located in various shining worlds. The greater the dimensions of these great spaces and realities were filled. The various shining worlds, and the greater the dimensions of these spaces and realities were filled. And that is why I kept telling you all to shine your beacons. You are all part of the primordial light. And so when space stretches the light, it gets dimmer. But if we all shine our light much brighter, the light envelops the spaces where it is stretched out. And this is the power we all have. We were never small and insignificant. That is the lies of the dark forces of which too many bought into it. And as a popular song I play on the show says, light up, as if you had a choice. Even if you cannot hear my voice, I'll be right beside you, dear. And what is right beside you is the primordial light and also within you. So it's not the case of light up as if you had a choice. It becomes a moral duty for all light warriors. Why become a shrinking violet when you can radiate with white gold? And that last line was not a request, it was a statement. Take much note of it. Now in them were born the life-bearing ancient gods, the patrons of worlds and the great spaces and realities, who developing in the divine light of the primordial pure Anglia, cognized and equipped their boundless spaces and realities and the more multi-dimensional the abodes of life were. The greater number of feelings were endowed with the ancient gods inhabiting the abodes of life. And that is how the highest and infinitely multi-dimensional light world of Prav was born. The greater number of feelings that were endowed then caused the gods to inhabit the abodes of life. People are asking, when are they going to visit? Well, in some cases they already have. Maybe you need to endow more feelings. And that is why this race of beings are different from all others. The ability to traverse all dimensional realities is not something attained by other races of beings. And that is what led, in my opinion, to the genetic games, the piggybacking games and host possession to ride our vessels and attempt to take over our unique soul spirit packages. Now, in my opinion, whilst it is the goal always to improve life and beings, one must also strive for balance and equality as well. One must ask as to why it was not put in place for other beings with sufficient soul development to attain the same multi-dimensional travel aspect. And this led to envy and the genetic skullduggery that has gone on for over 500 billion years. And this is what started the slide of the Draco beings, having been lied to by the Abraxans, who told them they had no soul and to chase after us, whilst they took over the real estate, as was revealed in the movie Jupiter Ascending. Now, below the highest world of rule, in each shining abode of life in the spaces of the golden path, not one reality was located, but many realities, and the beings inhabiting the abode of life had the same number of feelings, but the feelings of the beings in these realities lying next to each other were different. And for different thinking beings, different suns and stars shone. It adds a whole new meaning now to think different, does it not? Now, the primordial life-giving light of Anglia united the auroras of different suns and stars from a multitude of diverse realities, giving rise to the great trees of the worlds. How the branches of the tree were connected by the primordial life-giving light of the leaf reality of our world tree with the mighty shining trunk. Now each leaf reality shone immensely, shimmering with the bright light of various suns, and the trunk of the world tree had its numerous roots in the infinite new eternity generated in the new reality. And so high at the top, on the leaves realities, under the iridescent dazzling radiance of the great suns and stars, the new abode of life were born, in which the ancient god patrons of our great families appeared. And they inhabited the new abode of life, bringing to the beings born and living there beauty and creation with harmony, transforming the earth in the new abode of life into blooming fragrant gardens under bright multicoloured suns and stars. Not all suns or stars are yellow or orange like our sun. Some are white, blue and red, depending upon the spectral shift. And many systems have 2 or 3 suns, like Sirius. Now, having filled the shining new abodes of life with all sorts of blessings, they went to other realities, and there they also continued to create again, helping the inhabitants of these realities. And nature in those bright lands remained untouched, but life in the lands of those of beauty was filled. Now there the eternal wisdom poured out into the world and filled life with an immeasurable measure. The abode of life flourished in such a way that they were born into the new reality. Kind of explains a THI road trip in many ways. Filled with bright light and beauty, plus for those who have attended, have bathed within a new reality. Now the abodes of life in the shining world have developed in harmony and perfection, in all relations in deed and in life. Only conscience and wisdom were the measure. They were supplemented by love and faith, which leads to perfection of consciousness. Faith is not religion, it is knowledge. And this is what we are aspiring to return to, that resides deep in your genetic memory code, a world of need, not greed, caring and sharing, and people being cooperative. Wisdom and work inspire consciousness and strengthen glorious deeds. And those blossoming lands were transformed and beings turned their gaze to heaven. Now, directing their clear gaze to the heavens, the beings with all their souls aspired to those distant distances, from where their wise ancient patriarch gods arrived on earth, located in various realities. Now the primordial light of Anglia developed the flight of thought, giving rise to the great creation in all the harmonious light worlds, and various forms of life, thanks to pure and clear thought, as well as the great creation, left the blooming lands and rushed to the heavens, filling new spaces and realities in various multi-dimensionalities. And this is how the greatest and multi-dimensional spaces and realities of the light world of Navi or Nav were born. Spreading through diverse spaces and realities, wise thinking beings led by the ancient patron gods settled in the most beautiful uninhabited new lands of the bright world of Nav, and then went back to heaven. And this is how the harmonious worlds of Yav and Nav were populated, generated in the primordial living light of joy, which radiates from the primordial great Rah Maha. And this is explaining our return path and our destinies. But can we recreate that here on this planet before venturing into the heavens? How can we do that, you may ask? I have already told you many times. In this current time, space and holding pattern, you have choices to make, and also a test of your mental skills and thinking. What are you going to create? What are you going to manifest? I kept telling you. Did you listen and act upon it? Somehow I'll find my way home. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But life goes on. Karatya 3, the Great Asa. Asa means battle. At the source of the summer of the priestess of fire on the 576th circle of life, from the great migration of Arya along the circle of our number god on the great day of Anglia, when the wise priests light the sacred living fire in all the Vesi of the holy race and the Asgard of Irie. Now, about the great Asa between the light and darkness, which embraced the worlds of Yavi, Navi and Pravi, which is also Yav, Nav and Prav, and for future times in this Karatya of light that was inscribed by Darung Wirit. Now, having lifted up the glory to all the bright supreme gods and to the greatness of the heavenly race, may you see with your heart the greatness of the worlds of light. And again through the song of the sorcerer Sladagras, preserved in the Aryan lineage of Pada, will tell. Now, peace years ago, and perhaps yesterday, because eternity does not know limitation in time in the light world of Alex. I'm going to repeat that so you understand it. Peace years ago, and perhaps yesterday, because eternity does not know limitation in time in the light world of Alex, which covers 256 dimensions. There was a great Asa, the great battle of the forces of light and darkness. And one of the noble Arlegs, Chernobog, decided with the help of cunning to circumvent the universal laws of ascent along the golden path of spiritual development established by the god Sarog. And he said to his brethren, if we, the noble Arlegs, removed the security seals from the secret ancient wisdom of our world for the worlds of the lower, and then according to the law of divine correspondence, and for us, the security seals will be removed from the secret ancient wisdom of all the worlds of the highest, and free passage up to the golden path of spiritual development will open for us. Now, the noble Arlegs and this knowledge will also help all spirits and souls from various worlds below the world of Arlegs to know the secret ancient wisdom of all worlds, and having learned to stand next to God Svarog and other Svarichas. But Arleg Chernobog met a worthy rebuff in the person of the noble Arleg with Belobog, the supreme keeper of the secret ancient wisdom of the world of Arlegs, guarding the security seals from the secret ancient wisdom of this world, and the cunning plan of Chernobog failed. Now, at that time, the call of Chernobog rang out to all the worlds, spaces and realities that were lying along the golden path. And he called them for help, and the whole multi-dimensional world of legs appeared at the call of Chernobog. The dark Lehi, the dark Arlegs and the Koshis, the rulers of hell, flew to him uninvited, and with them the whole army of hell flew to him. Now Belobog alone could not resist such great dark forces, and Chernobog tore off the first security seal, the seal from the ancient knowledge of the world of Arlegs. Now the knowledge spread widely of the worlds lying below the world of Arlegs, right up to the very depths of the Inferno. And in turn, then the call of the wise Belobog sounded, who saw that he could not save the security seals alone with the secret ancient wisdom of the Arleg world. And he called for help from the higher worlds, and he turned to the guardians of the world of knowledge. But the keepers of the sacred ancient wisdom of the world of knowledge remained indifferent, since they did not want to fight with Chernobog, considering him a free in the choice of his actions, which was a catastrophic mistake from such higher beings. You see, we all make mistakes, no matter which level you are at. The key is to fix it and make sure they are never repeated. But Chernobog sounds like Lucifer to me, with the same dire consequences for us all due to their laziness and people wishing to cut corners with soul development. There are no shortcuts. Period. No saviour programs or hand-ups on those levels. You achieve what you achieve based only upon your own input and development. And I will repeat again for the hard of hearing, there are no shortcuts. Only the keepers of the hidden ancient wisdom of the worlds of beginnings, as well as the gods protectors from all the higher worlds and realities, responded to the call of the noble Belobog. And they surrounded the whole world of Arlegs with a dense energy dome of ice silence. And the great Asa began between the light and dark forces, and time stopped in the worlds. Now Arlegs are the dark forces along with the Koshi. Ice silence, I would suggest, is creating an ice age on those worlds. But it's interesting they referenced that time stopped. And that from the dark forces perspective is a cheat code. But they exposed it too much in their desperation, and some beings then worked it out. Now the great battle engulfed many lands of the worlds of Yav and Nav, from Inferno to the world of Nirvana. But the noble Arlegs did not want to participate in the great Asa, nor to fight against the protector gods from all the higher worlds and realities, and nor to remain inside the dense energy dome of the ice silence that was created by the keepers of the hidden ancient wisdom of the world of beginnings. With their artificial suns, they melted the adjacent part of the dome of the ice silence and descended into the world of legs and the intermediate worlds. And Chernobog, who also did not want to stay inside the dome of the ice silence, descended and found refuge in the world of dark Arlegs. Artificial suns, oh my. Now you know where the clowns got the idea from. It also reveals who they work with as well. And no, it will not happen here. Period. Now from the beginning of the great Asa, as it were, Belobog rose above the world of Arlegs, for he united the light forces with his call and led them to fight against the armies of the dark worlds. Now the defeated dark legs and dark Arlegs were sent to the worlds from which they came, taking from them a great oath, not to violate the laws of ascent along the golden path of spiritual development that was established by the god Sarog. Only the Koshi, the rulers of Inferno, hell, with the remnants of their armies rushed to the passage in the dome of ice silence which the noble Arlegs had created. And they disappeared into their inferno, realizing that the life forces do not penetrate into other people's worlds and realities, carrying the tigers of war on their banners. And by the will of Sarog, the gods protectors from all the highest worlds and realities, created the boundary, light and darkness separating, so that the dark forces could not penetrate into the light lands of Svarga. Now the line was laid through the lands in Yav, in order to separate the light from darkness of the world of Nav. The explicit frontier separated all realities of Nav, and the dark Nav was brought below Yav. Reality expanded, grew and strengthened, blocking all passages for Inferno and also the dark Arlegs and Legs, who fought against Belobog and committed evil in Svarga, the most pure. Boundless reality, like a boundary, separated the world of Inferno and darkness, where power dominates, from the wisdom of the ancient knowledge of the world, where conscience dominates, light, not force. But the dark forces who have tasted knowledge direct their gaze to the worlds of creation. And can it be stated that a lack of wisdom upon a planet creates more darkness? The solution then is to teach our children in the highest possible form, not the current indoctrination rubbish. The education solution in the blueprint covers that. Karatya 4, the arrangement of the worlds. And this was at the very source of the summer of the priestess of fire, on the 576th circle of life from the great migration of the Arya, all according to the number god after the day of great Anglia. Now, on the arrangement of the various worlds and the new great Asa between light and darkness, which embraced the four halls of Svarga and Midgard Earth, and for future times in the Haratya of light, which was inscribed by Darung Wirut. Now, having lifted up the glory to all the highest bright high gods and the greatness of the heavenly race, may you see with your heart the greatness of life in the worlds through what the song of the sorceress Sladagorus, preserved in the Aryan lineage of Pada, will tell. Now, the summer of the priestess of fire, 131 years on the circle of the number god, is what that means. 16, Da'aya, the sacred country, was located on the sunken continent in the Northern Ocean. Now, Da'aya was called by various peoples in their own way Arctica, Hyperborea, Severia, and Arctogea. 17, in all Vesi of the holy race, means in all 16 regions of Bolodvia, also called Semi-Rishi or Reshi. The Great Asa is the heavenly battle between the light and dark forces. The 19, the four halls of Svarga, is the four constellations: Makosh, Ursa Major, Radha, Orion, Race, small and large Leo, and Swati. There are no analogues in modern constellations. 20, Midgard Earth is the ancient Slavic Aryan name for the planet Earth. Now, in the great country of Ta-Kemi, which was located east of Antlani and south of Great Venice. There were numerous tribes with the skin of the colour of darkness, and tribes with skin of the colour of the setting sun. 25. Among these tribes were two powerful castes of priests, and they had 3 spiritual teachings which were given to them by the Aryans, who came from the country of the ants. Now, Tarkemi is the ancient name of a country that existed in the north of the African continent on the territory of modern Egypt. 22. Antlan, the land of the ants, was located on a large island that sank in the Atlantic Ocean about 13,000 years ago, and the ancient Greeks called the land of Antes Atlantis. Great Venice, the country in which the clans and tribes of the Wends live, the territory of modern Europe. 24. Tribes with the skin of the colour of darkness were known as Negroid peoples of the north of the African continent. 25. Tribes with the skin of the colour of the setting sun are the ancestors of certain Semitic peoples, in particular the Arabs. The Arabs are the Semitics. Well, I never. Now, one spiritual teaching, external, not representing a mystery given to the peoples by the Tarkemi priests of the initial caste, and not recognised by the priests themselves as the true faith, said that the soul of each person after death moves into the body of a person of one or another caste, sometimes a magnificent leader or even a high priest. Now, when the life of a deceased person was high and worthy, and also in the body of an animal, insect, or even a plant, when a person unworthy lived his own life. But the priests of this caste themselves professed a different spiritual teaching, and they sincerely thought and believed that the transmigration of human souls takes place not only on Midgard Earth, but that the souls of deceased people go to other Earths of our universe, where they incarnate in the bodies of people or animals of other worlds, dependent upon their actions in the manifest life on Midgard Earth. And they called this law karma, in honour of the great goddess Karna, who monitors the observance of the law of spiritual perfection. However, amongst the priests of the second caste, there was a group of even more highly initiated, and few of the priests of the lower castes were known, and they had a different spiritual teaching which was very different from the previous ones. Now, caste, spelled with an E on the end, had a different meaning back then. It meant a trade union, a union of 100. And this spiritual teaching said that our surrounding manifest world, the world of yellow stars and solar systems, is only a grain of sand in the infinite universe, and that there are stars and suns white, blue, purple, pink and green, and stars and suns of colours that we have never seen and our senses do not comprehend. Now, I mentioned in an earlier show about the vivid colours seen in dream or vision mode. That passage appears to describe some of it. Our senses do not comprehend, it says. You will if you develop on the mental planes, not just the astral. And the other senses begins to connect up to 12. and there is a massive difference between the basic 5 senses, particularly the visual one. Now, their number is infinitely great, their diversity is infinite, and the spaces separating them are endless. And all these various worlds are only fiery lamps standing at the entrance to the hall of the Creator, who's known as the great Rah Maha. And all these various worlds are nothing before other worlds lying outside of our universe. And again, their number is infinitely great and their diversity is immeasurably great. And the infiniteness of the limbs divide all these diverse worlds. Now, these wise priests taught that in our universe there is a golden path of spiritual ascent leading up and called Svarga, along which the harmonious worlds are located, and they follow after one another. The world of people, the world of legs, the world of our legs, the world of Aryans, the world of radiance, the world of nirvana, the worlds of beginnings, the world of spiritual power, the world of knowledge, the world of harmony, the world of spiritual light, the worlds of spiritual heritage, the world of law, the worlds of creation, the world of truth, the worlds of patrons, and many others to the greatest world of rule. Now, some of the highest bearers of the spiritual heritage in our universe, in their goodness, descended and placed their worlds between the worlds of Arlegs and Aryans, in order to place their camps closer to those in need of help. Now, the worlds along the golden path are those mentioned in the ancient Vedas. If the world of people is 4-dimensional, then the worlds located along the golden path have the following number of dimensions. The world of legs is 16. The world of Arlegs, 256. The world of Aryans, 65,536, which is a key number. Now, the worlds of radiances is the same figure of 65.536, but has 2. The world of nirvana has 4. The world of beginnings, 8. The world of spiritual power, 16. The world of knowledge, 32. The world of harmony, 64. The world of spiritual light, 128. The world of spiritual heritage, 256. The world of law, 512. Worlds of creation, 1024. The world of truth, 2048. The world of patrons, 4096. Now, they're all the power of the number. The world of people is 4-dimensional, they said. Oh my. I wonder how that works. Is science lying again? Are there examples showing people can traverse a 4D environment? Now, research using virtual reality finds that humans, despite living in a 3-dimensional world, can, without special practice, make spatial judgments about line segments embedded in 4-dimensional space, based on their length, 1-dimensional, and the angle, 2-dimensional, between them. So how can they do that with no training? Well, genetic memory explains that. Now, in another study, the ability of humans to orient themselves in 2D, 3D and 4D mazes has been tested, and each maze consisted of 4 path segments of random length and connected with orthogonal random bends, but without branches or loops, which were actually labyrinths. And the graphical interface was based on John McIntosh's free 4D maze game, and the participating persons had to navigate through the path and finally estimate the linear direction back to the starting point. And the researchers found that some of the participants were able to mentally integrate their path after some practice in 4D. And researchers also hypothesized that human acquisition of 4D perception could result in the activation of brain visual areas and entorhinal cortex, all of which proves the genetic memory code within us all. Well, did you remember? The path of spiritual development, known as the Golden Path, which unknowingly all of you have been learning in your time at THI. But there are also intermediate worlds, 5, 7, 9, 12, and smaller in the number of dimensions. At the end of the Svarga passes the frontier, beyond which the greatest world of Prav begins. Now, in addition to the harmonious and intermediate worlds located along the Golden Path, there are realities that come in. Time, space, wandering spirits, changing images, shadows, sounds, numbers, the world of darkness, also called the Inferno or the Abyss, where the heaviest particles of primordial darkness entered. The worlds located along the Golden Path are more harmonized and more complete in their manifestations than the intermediate realities. For example, although in the reality of the 5 dimensions, there are more opportunities for the development of spirits than in the world of reality. But due to the eternal disorder in the reality of the 5 dimensions, particles of primordial darkness often explode. An example of spaces and realities of smaller dimensions are the worlds of sounds, shadows, mirror images, ever-changing images, where constant transformations take place. And there a flower can become in a moment the scroll of Karatya, then a worm, a lynx, etc. And all these worlds and realities are not located separately at all, but penetrate each other. So where in one reality the great waves of the sea are raging, in another reality the forest is rustling, or there are high mountains covered with eternal snows. And the reason for the transition from one reality to another, a new reality, a change in the lines of force of the spirits, and the law of the goddess Karna. The infinite spaces, these separating realities, are, as it were, streets in a big city, where spirits of different worlds can meet in their original form. But when spirits enter someone else's world or reality, they must obey the laws existing in this world. The problem is, we didn't create the laws. They did. And we allowed them. So all of that is an interesting concept that I will try to break down into understandable sentences in the modern day. It said at the end of the Svarga passes the frontier beyond which the greatest world of Prav begins. Is the frontier the threshold and leap of faith we speak about? The worlds along the golden path is filled with distractions like time, space, wandering spirits, changing images, shadows, sounds, numbers, the world of darkness, also called the inferno or the abyss. Observe, don't absorb. Their madness is the solution to that. Although in the reality of the 5 dimensions there are more opportunities for the development of spirits than in our world of reality, but due to the eternal disorder in the reality of the 5 dimensions, particles of primordial darkness often explode. That is 1 through 5D. And you see, 5D is not the get out of jail free card that proponents of ignorance like Alan James and a plethora of New Age bullshitters will have you believe. There are still issues there as well, although it is easier to see and address than here. But it says, as an example of spaces and realities of smaller dimensions are the worlds of sound, shadows, mirror images, ever-changing images, where constant transformations take place. Well, negative sounds via towers, although work to address those is underway, and dancing shadows due to a lack of shadow work, and mirror images which are distortions, and ever-changing images which are the glitches in the matrix and the Mandela effects. It is an overlay of the realities, as they said here. All these worlds and realities are not located separately at all, but penetrate each other. And the key is to decode them and remain aware of your surroundings. Which reality do you need to reside in at a given point in time? You have to define that. That is your path, and you cannot let other people or their trickery either deceive you or take you from your path. THI has shown you the golden path, but only you can walk it. Now, the peculiarity of the world structure is that all worlds, all realities, regardless of the number of dimensions that determine them, are in the same place in relation to human understanding and to the infinite closure while filling our entire universe. But there are barriers between the worlds and realities of different dimensions which can be overcome and joined the life of another world or reality only by receiving the number of feelings and those qualities that are a characteristic of such a world or reality. Now, the number of feelings is describing the right frequencies to enter, and again that is based upon your own soul development. Now, some worlds or universes with the same number of dimensions exist next to each other, while realities penetrate one another. And that is how some UFOs appear and disappear. They blade through in and out of our reality. And it's a bit like cloaking that is done by crafts, and also ourselves if we develop enough. But having qualitatively different feelings or different forms and conditions of life, the inhabitants of these realities existing in a single dimensional spatial structure do not collide with each other, and sometimes do not even suspect the existence of each other. And each such reality has its own nature, its own time flows, and there are its own laws inherent only in this reality. And many of these laws are difficult for the perception of a person living in our manifest world, because they do not fit into the generally accepted framework of human perception. And within the framework of this form of existence, and as a result of this, the meaning of the laws of an alien reality becomes incomprehensible to a person. Now, cognition of the surrounding world of nature and one's inner world leads a person to realize himself as an integral part of the universe. And if cognition is supplemented by the ability to create, this then opens up the opportunity for a person to cognize not only his world of reality, but also other worlds and realities that are sometimes lying beyond the threshold of human perception and understanding. Now, transition to another world or reality is possible, but for this it is necessary to cross the threshold that is associated with the loss of the body of this dimension. And such a transition in the world of Yav is called death by the people. Now, if the higher beings of other worlds and realities fall into this world, then they begin to be perceived here not in their original true essence, but in the forms of perception of this world which are only available to its inhabitants. Now, the more complex the structure of the world or reality in a certain area of the golden path, the greater the chances for the inhabitants of this area to be reflected in the consciousness of the worlds or realities of less complexity. Yet, what is about to be attempted between now and 2072 and beyond is the ability to transcend in body for the first time. Now, at the base of the golden path is the world of people, and the ascent of a person to a higher world or higher reality is possible only as a result of spiritual development. And for this, the gods came to the world of people, and the teachers of mankind came as well. And they are beings of a higher order of complexity, who come down to guide and transmit the higher knowledge and commandments. After all, not only he himself works on the development of the spiritual path and the spiritual essence of a person, but also the universal forces that elevate or delay his spiritual path and spiritual development. Now, the ascent of the inhabitants from one reality to a higher one does not necessarily happen gradually. If in his development a person gets the opportunity to join the understanding of the complexity of the nearest harmonized world along the golden path, then this abruptly transfers him to the higher world, bypassing the various worlds and realities of intermediate dimensions. Now, the fate of each spiritual entity largely depends entirely on the goddess Karna, who contributes to or hinders its development and perception of fundamentally new structures and forms of the higher worlds. Freed from the physical body, the personality chooses the reality that most corresponds to its spiritual path and spiritual development. Now, these realities belong to the same infinity as the corresponding areas on the golden path, but the structural forms and content are presented in them in different combinations. And nothing in the universe prevents the ascension of the spirit except himself. Nothing in the universe prevents the ascension of the spirit except himself or herself. Oops. An important note to us all: nothing prevents the ascension of the spirit except him or herself. So, you see, it is all down to you to be the saviour of the self, the redeemer of the self, and the developer of the self. And all that requires personal responsibility. Now, getting into a certain area of Svarga, depending on his own level of spiritual development, a person begins to live according to the laws of the world of this infinity. And in a number of limbs, there is one, which is more than a giant ball, the surface of which is the boundary of this limblessness. And in some places, this ball is almost in contact with other limbs, which are also in the form of balls, and in places where one have cone-shaped spaces have been formed between the spherical limbs. And there are worlds which are, as it were, pyramids or cones, the three sides of which and the bases are concave surfaces. On one of these supergiant balls lives highly gifted beings, who by terrestrial standards can be called people, although they only remotely resemble people. And some of their dwellings resemble trees, others giant mushrooms or beautiful gigantic flowers, to the entrance to which they climb on special flying machines similar to the earthly Whiteman's. Now, the Whiteman is a flying celestial chariot. I may have to spell that, just in case people think it's the white spelt as the colour. It's W-I-G-H-T, man. And it is a spaceship on which gods and humans travel between Earths or planets. And there are also stranger monasteries, as if a column of smoke rises there in a wide and long spiral, and people live in the voids of this spiral. And all of them eat a variety of food prepared from the clots of energy of that inhabited world. As an addition to what's in the transcript, the Whiteman is also the Vitmana, and the Vitmaras, by the way. It's the true term. The Vitmanas and Vitmaras, as the name, is more the Hindu term and not the original term. They're called Whitemans and White Maras. Now, in these spirals that people live in, and the voids of the spiral, all of them eat a variety of food prepared from clots of energies of that inhabited world. This food is easily extracted when necessary from the soil and air and is absorbed by them in extremely small quantities. Now, that is life force energy they are consuming, which makes a mockery of "you can't eat the animals" brigade. Energy is energy no matter which form it is consumed. And at every point in life, you are consuming something or someone else. Plants have energy and have consciousness, feelings, emotions, and everything else to be a living, breathing life source. And yet, curiously, the vegans overlook this fact of life. We mentioned earlier, plants have souls. And people dress in gorgeous fabrics created from different energy flows. They don't know anything like need. And these people have all sorts of machines and mechanisms, and all clans belonging together, and young people willingly working for them, making everything necessary or desirable from the clots of energies. Manifestation, that is. And sometimes a person falls into worlds that are beyond any connection with the golden path. These are realities that come in time, space, karma, madness, wandering spirits, and the world of darkness, also called the hell world. In addition, he can get into the intermediate realities of Svarga, which are characterized by uncertainty, a violation of cause and effect relationships. And what happens in them is what the inhabitants of the harmonious worlds perceive as a miracle. However, for the inhabitants of the intermediate realities, this is extremely inconvenient, as you can never reliably predict the result of your actions. Now, throughout the golden path, the only true and unconditional law of the universe operates is love for everything that exists, and creation and the birth of love is preceded by wise knowledge. The birth of love is preceded by wise knowledge. I would add soul development to that, to then be able to experience the birth of love through the music of the spheres. But through love and knowledge, each spiritual essence develops, rising to the Creator and gradually comprehending his or her creation, and having cognized, begins to create something of its own, filled with love. And the highest manifestation of love is self-sacrifice to help the lower. And this is what the Lehigh do, who lead people and the highest bearers of the spiritual heritage, who bring to people the knowledge of the supreme perfect love. Love teaches understanding, mercy and sacrifice. Now when they and I myself are talking in terms of sacrifice, here it is sacrificing the self to help others, which is service to others. Because if you are service to others and to reach the higher realms, you have to be service to others. You cannot have service to self. The higher you go, the more service to others you are. And so in essence, you are self-sacrificing the self to then help the lower ones, which is service to others. Now these qualities prepare a person for service to others and for creativity, which is seen as a struggle against evil, as the complicity in the deeds of the transformation of the world. and it is necessary to properly consider the fight against evil, as evil is not absolute. Evil is only a manifestation of underdevelopment and ignorance. Even the demons, the lower beings of the dark world, are not devoid of hope for spiritual ascent in the distant future, for liberation from dirt and anger as a result of a long path of development under the guidance of the highest spiritual mentors of the golden path. And the act of any spiritual entity first of all affects itself. And since any individuality has absolute freedom of choice, its decisions affects its structure. And its future fate depends on the choice. And by some actions, the developing personality contributes to its ascent up various areas of the golden path, and by others it burdens itself, strengthens the ties that hinder development, and even drag it down to the dark worlds. And this is the law of the goddess Karna in case of impossibility of ascent, and it becomes necessary to go through the whole circle of life again, but in other realities, in order to perform the necessary work on one's spiritual essence. And what that is telling you is you have the choice. You can push along the golden path, or you can fall. Often it's ego, and you can end up on the dark worlds. And the next lifetime, you could be stuck on that dark world in order to perform the necessary work on one's spiritual essence, it said. So it's teaching you a lesson. The important thing is you learn those lessons, not keep repeating it. Now, in primitive human perception, the law of the goddess Karna was reflected as the idea of the three great judgments after death, also called the Last Judgment. In fact, there is no Last Judgment, there is only a delay in ascent. And even then, only temporarily, because everything is subject to the unified law of ascension from the lowest to the highest beings. Evil, even if unwittingly created, always weighs down its creator. And only where the spiritual beings are so high that ascent is a natural condition of their life, which itself is aimed at facilitating the ascent of the lower beings. That's the service to others again. You reside generally in the astral, you're more likely to be service to self only. You may say that you're otherwise, but there is a self-centeredness about people who are residing in the astral. You go onto the first mental planes and that self-centeredness goes away, because that is the principle by which you must stand by. You have to increase and go 51% at least service to others. That's how you develop on the mental planes. The more service to others and less to the self, which is the self-sacrifice, the higher your development. Now, where the higher spiritual beings are facilitating the ascent of the lower beings, their karma is an inevitable pattern of movement in the spiritual world, yields to another active principle which appears in the form of love. And the inhabitants of different worlds and realities are looking for the most complete correspondence between the way of life and their own essence. And thus the spirits of the elemental forces see happiness in gaining power and victory over the elements. The spirits of stars of knowledge understand happiness as the accumulation of wisdom, as the comprehension of the worlds and also themselves. Now, for the spirits of death, happiness exists in the transition from reality to reality. The spirits of space are happy to overcome it. But the fullness of happiness can only be in the constant struggle against evil, which prevents the inhabitants of the dark lands from starting to climb through various areas of the golden path. And this is possible only in one way, in communication with other inhabitants of one's reality, in educating the spiritual essence of a person to perceive the universal life principle, which manifests itself in all areas of the golden path. And the instructions of the highest bearers of the spiritual heritage, who bring the divine light to the inhabitants of all realities, are united in their basic provisions. For ascent, it is only important to realize one's unity, indissoluble kinship with other entities, putting between oneself and them love for equals and compassion for the lower forms of life. Mercy and faith in the all-healing feeling of love, and the goodness are able in the future to transform even demons. These seemingly eternal enemies of the divine light, animals of the world of darkness who preach among the people of the manifest world permissiveness, cruelty, greed, selfishness, and the finiteness of existence. And that is how you really develop. Because in reality there is no dark. There is no light. It's about choice and thought. It goes right back to the beginning. Some people started off as light beings and ended up dark. We've seen enough on this planet in this lifetime. And vice versa. And the key is to help the all. Even the so-called dark ones, which is what the blueprint is all about. Now, demons, the lower essences of the dark world, arose at the birth of the worlds in the darkness, and were similar to the legs, from which they differ only in the initial absence of the divine light. The true lords of the dark worlds are the dark Legi, L-E-G-I, the dark Arlegs and the Koshis, the princes of darkness. And they arose in the primordial darkness, when particles of the great Anglia, the primordial life-giving light, came into their worlds. But their active development began in the time of the great Asa, in those dark realities where the seeds of ancient knowledge fell, when Chernobog broke the security seals from the secret ancient wisdom of the Arleg world. And having gained the ancient knowledge of the world of Arlegs, some of the realities of the worlds of darkness immediately began to fight against darkness and began to climb to the top along the golden path. However, possessing power and ancient knowledge, they did not learn to distinguish between good and evil, carrying within themselves the indelible particles of the original primordial darkness. That was not going along the path. They jumped the path, and with devastating consequences. Knowledge is power, which can be used in two ways, good and evil. But when that knowledge gained begins to wield its power over you and others, the fall escalates. It is one thing having the knowledge, it is another to know what to do with it. And knowledge with wisdom begins clarity of thought and action. Knowledge without wisdom leads to muddiness and indecision. And with spiritual ascension, there are no shortcuts. Each letter from A to Z has to be ticked off in order to advance the soul path. The beginning of power, coercion and submission permeates all dark worlds and realities. And they tried to introduce this low form in the areas bordering the world of darkness, in which the halls of the Mikoshi, Radha and Rasa fell, as well as the arm of the Swati Hall, where Urilo's sun and our Midgard earth are located. And all this led to the beginning of a new great Asa. And this happened because the Aryans did not let the Dark Ones to the top of the golden path, offering them to first transform into the light, and for this they drew the frontier through the lands of the manifest world. And at the time of the new great Asa, the Dark Ones were expelled from all the lands that were in the halls of Mikoshi, Radha and Race, and therefore the path of the dark spirits and souls began to pass only through the world of people living on the lands in the sleeve of the Swati Hall. And only through the world of people it became possible to climb to the top along the golden path. A particularly important role was played by Midgard Earth, located in the middle between light and darkness. And because of this, the dark forces decided to give power over people to the demons. And that is why on Midgard Earth there is a struggle between the light and dark forces, in which people from different clans and nations participate. Nations means races, not countries. This next part is called the Book of Anglism, and this is the introduction. Anglism is the third book in the series of Slavic Aryan Vedas that was published for general use. And the book is intended to tell modern man the true truth, without any distortions or false interpretations about the ancient faith of the Slavic and Aryan peoples. And for our contemporaries in the Russian state and abroad, the very name of the ancient faith of the Slavic and Aryan peoples, Anglism, is forgotten and seems to be something alien. For in the modern world there is an indisputable, scientifically proven opinion about the so-called traditional Russian religions, which have made their immeasurable contribution to the creation of the entire Russian history and the Russian state. And these religions today include Christianity, Islam, Judaism and Buddhism. But if we carefully consider this indisputable, scientifically proven opinion about traditional Russian religions, it turns out that Christianity was brought from the Byzantine Empire, Islam from the Arabian Saud, Judaism from Israel and Buddhism from China. And it turns out that the Russian people had nothing of their own, no history, no faith, no culture, and everything was borrowed. What did the Russian people have initially? In what or in whom did they believe before the appearance of traditional Russian religions? Now, official historical, or it's sometimes hysterical science, answers this question unequivocally. The Russian people were pagans and professed paganism, the barbaric cult of ignorant semi-savage people. Now, much has been said about pagans courtesy of pro-pagan Da, and peoples and cultures have been broad swept by the so-called recognised religions. But what are the Russian definitions of pagans? 1. Pagans, foreigners, representatives of a foreign people with alien beliefs, traditions and culture. That was the Old Church Slavonic Dictionary of Moscow in 1894. 2. Tribes hostile to the Slavs, who spoke other languages and believed in other gods. 3. This word means all people who have not been announced by the gospel preaching of salvation and who have not accepted Christianity. But if you ask a representative of official historical science about what beliefs other peoples of Midgard Earth had before the emergence of traditional world religions, the answer will be the same: paganism. And one involuntarily gets the impression that all peoples on earth, without exception, before the advent of the traditional world religions, professed the only religion as paganism. People worshipped the same gods, the same forces of nature, and consequently were all ignorant barbarians and had no history. And this is the story of most countries and cultures, all formulated by the appearance of separate churches when they were actually one and the same. Did each nation on earth have its own history, culture, tradition? There was its own people's faith, which had its own original basis and its own unique name. Now, the original faith of any people, not amorphous paganism, should never be studied and considered as something isolated, mythical or mythological, not connected either with the history of the people or with its original culture and ancient tradition. But according to the modern view of his story of mankind, and it covers about 5,000 to 6,000 years from ancient Egypt to the present day, almost all peoples of the world, except for the people of Israel, history begins with some sacred legend, a unique epic or myth headed by a great hero, the ancestors who gave the people his name. And yes, because life according to the Vatican cult started 6,000 years ago, which is funny that considering Göbekli Tepe is at least 11,000 years and the pyramids are near 50,000 years old. But there you go. 6,000 years is their story, not our story. Now, for some reason, Russian history begins to be considered from the time when the great Russian power represented a huge social system, a strong people who inhabited the vast territories of Eurasia. But the great Russian power, rich in trade, crafts and industry, for some reason it is customary today to divide into two large independent states, Kievan Rus and Novgorod Rus, as well as several small Russian principalities. As if Silver Russia, now called Serbia, never existed in the past. The northerners, Pomors, did not have their own state of Pomeranian Russia, which was Prussia, which is part or large part of Poland. Now, few people know, even among scholars, what the other great Russian principalities were originally called, and that they were part of a single mighty Slavic Aryan power covering the vast expanses of Europe and Asia, called Russinia. Russinia, the territory in which the great race, white peoples, settled. So it wasn't just Europe, it was Asia as well. Now, subsequently, the word Russinia passed into the Latin language Ruthenia, and it began to be translated simply as Rus. In ancient times, the territory of Russinia was washed by the waters of four oceans: Studeni, which is the Arctic; Eastern, the Pacific; Western, Atlantic; and Mada, Indian. And at the same time, it is absolutely hushed up that the division of the great Russian state into independent and sometimes opposing principalities began as a result of interference in the internal affairs of the Russian land of foreign states in the 8th to 10th centuries. From the Volga, Bulgaria and the Khazar Khaganate to the Byzantine and Roman empires. The supreme authorities of these states used various methods of inciting discord and enmity between the great Russian princes, from flattery, deception, forgery, slander, bribery to armed raids on Slavic cities and villages. And when these messages did not succeed due to worthy rebuff from the Slavic armies, the great Russian princes and their retinues, under the guise of civilized enlightenment, began to impose new religions that were alien to the Slavs and Aryans. Judaism and Christianity of the Byzantine persuasion, Arianism and Roman Catholicism, Assyrian Zoroastrianism, Arab Islam and China Buddhism, all different names, all under the banner of the Jewish law book, the Talmud. And yes, the forced religions to bring down the white race primarily, but to also create division and dependency to all other races. Religion breeds child-level thinking, wanting a parent or saviour to save them, instead of developing, saving and being responsible for themselves. Now, the Slavs and Aryans have always been tolerant people. They knew about Christ and Jehovah, about Mithras and Osiris, about Allah and Shiva, about Gautam Buddha, and about the creator of a new ritual of fire worship, Zarathustra, and calmly treated these and other religious directions. In those ancient times, temples of various religions stood in the cities of the great Russian lands for more than 1 century, in which foreign merchants who came to the market celebrated their religious and cult rites. The foreign merchants were the Jews. They ran the the Silk Road. And it was these temples that later became centres for the destruction of the Slavic and Aryan old faith, history, culture and tradition. And it is necessary to immediately explain that the persecution of those professing the old faith and its priests was arranged not by true followers of this or that religious teaching, who realised the deep innermost meaning of God's word, but by those latter-day, that sounds familiar, latter-day adherents who use this or that religious teaching for their personal and selfish purposes, and newly converted followers who did not know the true spiritual essence of the teaching. And as a rule, the first of the latter-day adherents used the second to achieve their selfish goals. And they were incited against the followers of the ancient beliefs and demanded the destruction of the latter because they were supposedly enemies of the true faith. And people in general have no idea how devious and indeed deadly the subversion of the people's religion has been. Whole villages, towns and cities destroyed, threats of being labelled heretics and burned at the stake, and all kinds of other oppressive measures of a heinous nature. The Spanish Jews who came as conquistadors did it. The pilgrims said to be coming here to America to avoid religious persecution was a lie. They were coming here to persecute people on American lands. But they concluded their attitude towards the executors of the plans in the phrase, "Make the ignoramus pray to God, he will break his forehead." What an interesting phrase that is, break his forehead. Is that the third eye and also taking over the mind? In my opinion, yes. Because all religion is a mind control process on billions of people, many of which have died following these cults. Now, the facts that serve as the basis for the creation of the most ancient Russian history lay under the cover for a long time, not disassembled, not considered and not passed through the crucible of sound and impartial criticism. Meanwhile, the history of the most ancient peoples, the Slavs and Aryans, is so rich in facts that everywhere there are traces of them woven into the life of all peoples of Europe and Asia, with a strict analysis of which the great Russian power itself becomes the greatest in the world. Now, some Germanic and Arab historians conscientiously studied Russian history, but ignorance of all the main Slavic and Aryan dialects, as well as their little acquaintance with the character, manners, customs, domestic life and beliefs, made this matter difficult. We will not say much about those who set themselves the duty to humiliate and denigrate everything that relates to the history of the Slavs and Aryans. Such specialists exist to this day. And by now, as this is the 33rd episode of this series, I'm sure you are all aware of exactly who has done and does do that. Those that call themselves Jews, which by their culture and religion of law they are, but are entirely different from the average everyday Jewish person. It is the Jewish elites who run these denigration programs, not just on the Rus and Aryans, but the world over. They have attempted in the past and are now trying to deprive the Slavs and Aryans not only of their history, glory, greatness, power, wealth, industry, trade, as well as all the other good qualities of the soul and heart, but even seek to eradicate their old faith, ancient tradition, and the original culture. Most of the world's culture has been dictated by the media, particularly over the past 80 years. Americans set up as the world police so that they are denigrated as a gun-toting, murdering squad. And just like the so-called British Empire previously, it is a set-up to bring down those countries, throw in the Dutch, French and Germans, and the common denominator of angst and denigration is the white race. And for basic common sense, if you are going to have a world police, why wasn't China or India selected? After all, they have the highest populace. In fact, the region of the world, China, India, Japan and the islands in between, contains over 50% of the world's populace in that one small sector of this planet. Over 50% of the world's populace of this planet is contained within China, India, Japan and the islands in between. And yet, curiously, the overpopulation brigade never focuses on that, do they? And one of the ways such so-called experts have chosen is the imposition of plausible lies. For the example, the myth that the supposedly ancient faith of the Slavic and Aryan peoples disappeared more than 1,000 years ago during the Christianization of Russia. And in the modern world, there are no traces of the ancient faith and there are no followers. This is a lie that has been imposed on people for a long time. The solution is in the next song. As if there was a period as if there was no period of dual faith in Russia, destroyed by the Patriarch Nikon and the Tsar Alexei Mikhailovich Romanov in the 17th century, when representatives of the pre-Christian Old Faith and the Orthodox Old Believers, Yinglings, and Orthodox, that is, righteous Christians, peacefully coexisted on Russian lands. But the period of dual faith is well described in the writings of the academician Rah Maha. The Romanov family line, which has just been mentioned, actually ended in the 1500s and was superseded by the Holstein family line, who were German Jews. Now, the Patriarch Nikon in the 17th century, he headed the Russian Orthodox Christian Church in Muscovy, and he carried out a church reform which led to a schism amongst Christians. Christians who did not accept Nikon's reforms began to be called the official church, Old Believers or Schismatics. Now the Old Believers, the Yinglings, Radzivill's Chronicle calls them Ing Lions. And in addition, the date of the forced baptism of the people in Kiev in 988 is automatically considered the date of the baptism of all Russian cities and settlements. And it is worth considering, how could the Russian people accept Christianity 1,000 years ago in an 850-year-old Moscow? a 400-year-old Tayuman or a 60-year-old Magadan. Now, Patriarch Nikon, with his church reform in the 17th century, not only replaced the two-fingered with a three-finger and directed the procession around the churches towards the sun, he did everything to erase the memory of the pre-Christian Orthodox old faith among the people inhabiting Muscovy, the sun being represented by the fake Egyptian Ra in their eyes at this point. Now, for the representatives of the Byzantine Orthodox Christianity, the greatness, wisdom and glory of pre-Christian orthodoxy were the main obstacle to the spread of the new doctrine among the common people, whose culture and traditions they did not understand and considered wild, which is why they called them barbarians. Just like today's modern woke culture, if you don't follow the script, out comes negative names and labels. Now, Orthodox Christianity is described as unchanging, primordial. Orthodoxy or orthodoxia, unswerving adherence to the foundations of any doctrine, worldview. In religion, orthodoxy, unswerving adherence to the traditional teachings of the church. And this is how the system operates, but it only works because stupid or ignorant people comply with it. It is like free speech. They tell you that you have it until you mention Jews in a negative way, and then the full Talmudic law comes down upon you. And then you get labelled Jew hater, anti-Semitic, anti-God, white supremacist and all kinds of other childish names. But there is another thing that applies, or perhaps not, as the case may be. Nobody is above the law. Yeah, right. Because the law doesn't apply to anyone operating the system, only to the people, whether just or not. And for example, back in the 9th century, the Byzantine missionary Belisarius, who visited Russia, wrote, "Orthodox Slovenes and Russins are wild people, and their life is wild and godless. Men and girls naked together lock themselves in a hotly exhausted hut and torturing their bodies, whipping themselves with wood rods mercilessly to exhaustion, and after jumping into an ice hole or a snowdrift, and hollowed again, going to the hut, torturing their bodies." But that is the hot and cold springs or sauna techniques for cleansing and a healthy heart. But as we have seen, we can only take their pills, jabs and potions to be healthy. That's how it works. Or it doesn't. Because the only problem with that is, hardly any of their pills, jabs and potions are healthy. And so by basic common sense, it means they don't work for us. It works for them as it makes us more sick, and we buy more pills and potions, and the sickness cycle continues. But as if a Greek Byzantine could understand what a Russian bath was, for him this ancient rite was a manifestation of savagery. The evidence of that statement is in the next line. "It is not because in the days of forced Christianization the baths were destroyed, as if the place was filthy and demonic." Oops. And in order to excommunicate people from everything native, to replace words and origins according to Nikon's decree, in Christian liturgical books the phrase Orthodox faith was replaced by Orthodox Christian faith, which entailed attributing to Christianity the achievements, greatness, wisdom and glory of pre-Christian Orthodoxy. However, they say we will not allow them to appropriate our native and magnify someone else's strength, glory and power and knowledge. Let us take away from them by arguments the fact that they so forcibly confined to the history of other peoples and robbing the history of the Slavs and Aryans. His story has played an important role in the cajoling of peoples into their way of being, eradicated entire populaces via war, forcing people into accepting other cultures and mould a new culture for them. And the old adage, those that don't remember the past are forced to repeat it again like a giant loop. And this is what has happened on this planet for a long time, and the system of control has used every organisation to mould the planet and its people into their image, none more so than the religious cults, who pretend to be different when they all have the same origin. And the same applies to all forms of government. All of it is Zionism. And many people recognise only generally accepted facts and documents that they themselves are able to study. And for them, one can quote the preamble to the Federal Law on Freedom of Conscience and Religious Associations, number 125 FZ, which entered into force on October the 1st, 1997. The Federal Assembly of the Russian Federation, recognising the special role of Orthodoxy in the history of Russia in the formation and development of its spirituality and culture, respecting Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Judaism and other religions that form an integral part of the historical heritage of the peoples of Russia, adopts this federal law. And as can be seen from the above fragment, Orthodoxy and Christianity, even in the preamble to the Federal Law of Russia, did not mean the same thing. And any free interpretations of the law are unacceptable. What is written with a pen cannot be cut down with an axe. And this is the real role and power of the churches that has been hidden from the followers and non-followers alike. The church, a bastion of morals and principles, they say. Nothing could be further from the truth. There is no evil pursuit on this planet that hasn't involved the churches. And yet 4.5 billion, they say, appear blinded by their own illusions they think is called faith. Yes, blind faith. And we know that history should not be panegyric, but we will not allow the enemies of Russia to turn the great history of the Slavs and Aryans into a satire and subject for ridicule. Indeed, the Slavs and Aryans, as a single people, educated before the Romans and Greeks, left many monuments about themselves in all parts of the old world, testifying to their stay there and to the most ancient writing, arts, enlightenment and the old faith. And yet another of the great questions the public never asks is, where is the history of Russia? Why is there news, films or documentaries or books never available on a global scale? And the answer is because the Zionist cult owns and runs everything, including all the churches, and they closed it all down. Historical monuments will forever be indisputable evidence, and they tell us about the actions of our great ancestors in the language that is native to us, which is the prototype of all Slavic and Aryan languages, dialects, and dialects that merge in it as in their common source. And of such works are moving slowly forward. Let us go slowly, slowly, but with a sure stop, and wish, may they be accomplished to the honour and glory of our ancient gods and wise ancestors. And the writer of this piece said, I would like to pay tribute to the memory of a wise man, the elder of the Valley tribal community, Father Vladimir, who devoted his life to zeal for the preservation of the old faith of our first ancestors and departed with the smoke of Krodny to Svarga, the most pure to the heavenly family. So who is Father Vladimir? Well, he was an elder and was a member of the circle of priests of Bolodvia, the author of church works on the ancient faith of the first ancestors and ancient Slavic history, in the world of Ivanov Nikolai Ivanovich, years of life 7435 to 7507 or 1927 to 1999. And this informative book is the fruit of the vital work of Father Vladimir, who tried to convey in the most accessible forms the ancient wisdom and the pure truth about the old faith of our ancestors, Anglism. Anglism to be sent to the hearts of ordinary people who seek to return to their ancient roots, to their ancient culture, old faith, majestic and beautiful tradition. It is necessary to immediately declare that Anglism is the ancient faith of the first ancestors and in its original basis, does not carry anything anti-Christian, anti-Semitic and anti-Islamic, as so-called experts in the pre-Christian faith and the culture of the Slavs and Aryans like to assert. For Anglism existed long before the appearance of Judaism, Christianity, Islam and other religious teachings on earth. The original origins of Anglism must be sought in the depths of antiquity, in the fertile and legendary country of the Arya, which was located on the sunken northern continent. And Orthodox old believers, Yinglings, have always been, are and will be tolerant people who respect the right of any person to profess any religion or faith and worship the God who is dearer to them and closer to them in spirit and conscience. But the religious tolerance of the Orthodox old believers, Yinglings, does not mean that they will allow their old faith to be thrown mud at all and sundry, to distort it in every possible way, or make the ancient faith of our first ancestors an object for ridicule. And in addition, readers should pay attention to the use of old words and speech patterns in this book. Many old words are used with prefixes without and times, instead of the now used demon and races. And this is due to the figurative meaning of old words. The original word for races was nations and got nothing to do with countries. And this adds a whole new meaning to the Jewish script of 70 nations, doesn't it? It refers to 70 races they are connected to, not 70 earthly countries. For example, immortality and immortality both are spelt the same way, but the figurative meaning of the first word means the spirit demon of death, and the figurative meaning of the second is eternity. Now, a deeper understanding into that was gained from the cosmic genetic series. And so, one immortality is a spirit demon of death, and the other is eternity. This is their secret code, you see, with the mistranslations. Or the words telling and story. The figurative meaning of the first word means that the information was told only once. And the figurative meaning of the second word means that the pure truth was told without distortions and additions. So telling means it was told only once. Excuse me. Story means it was told with pure truth without distortions and additions. A big difference. The word kumir, Kummir, in the text is used in the old spelling because it consists of two runic words. Kum, meaning a relative, and world, meaning the universe. So Kummir is a symbol of a relative living in the universe. And that was stated by Father Alexander in Asgard, summer 7508, which equates to the year 2000 from Asgard. If you ask the average person about Valkyrie, they will remember the movie about Nazis. But that was another overlay, an attempt to delete the history of the Norse gods who were connected to the Greek gods and the heirs of Perun, Tara and the Santis. A Valkyrie from Old Norse means chooser of the slain, and is one of a host of female figures who guide souls of the dead to the god Odin's hall Valhalla. But Valkyrie means the protector of the people from Irie, white water, who came to Scandinavia. And this is what the Yngling saga is about. Also, for 1400 years now, the entire Islamic world has praised Allah as Allahu Akbar, or Allahu Akbar, and glorified as God. But in other words, the phrase Allahu Akbar is translated as the gods are white people. Oops. And as the song goes, and you know sometimes words have two meanings, and notice they are often complete polar opposites. One could say one was light and one was dark. And so, are you buying the Stairway to Heaven when heaven is an interior bliss, not a destination? But you have to buy the ticket, they say. Nope, you just have to develop yourselves.
To heaven.
Final piece tonight. And there you have it. Another tale of how to be and how not to be. Another tale of confusion, diffusion, smoke and mirrors. And to what end? to hide the truth of this planet's history in favour of the dark forces. But a new day will dawn for those who stand long, the last song said. And yes, that new day dawned of Sarog on March 21st, 2020, and is here to stay for many lifetimes here. This is just the beginning. Only the light decide the end, the how, the what, and when is determined by us. As one member said recently, the experience will happen, not always in the exact way you imagine it, depending on the strength of focus and intent, but almost always in a similar way that you intended it to be. But this was also a sordid tale of the denigration of Russia, the Rus, the Slavs and the Aryans, using the most heinous methods to trample them into the ground and rewrite their history. This story, or this series, you will remember started off being called From Russia with Love, and due to fake copyright issues, we had to change it. The new title documents it even better in overview, as we went from his story to our story, which is now their story. The story of the Rus, the story of the triumph over the dark, the story of how to improve and develop ourselves, and the story of the folly of following their programs. The story of a swathe of peoples who did much to enhance and build this world, cast aside and labelled barbarians, second-class peoples, and worse, animals. There is a deep richness and purity as how they went about things in all aspects of life, and one should view it as being the way showers. The fact that we have to replay that in this time period shows how far we all fell, regardless of whether you are the white race or another race. The Ers, Rus and Aryans went around the world teaching all who would listen. It was for the people's benefit, and many did, including the Kali Ma sacrifice cult in Dravidia, now called India. But in a world of division and self-centeredness, I ask all colours or races, are these teachings and pathways bad in any way? Well, unless you are the dark forces, no one should feel these life lessons are bad. And so if they are not bad, why not adopt to them? If you will not adopt to them because it came from the white race or the Russians, what is that saying about you? The thing is, we can all learn from each other and learn to be cooperative or carry on their story of division, mistrust and hatred. Think and act different is our meme. Have you adopted it? Are you wearing it? Has it become part of you? Embrace and integrate is another meme. Have you adopted it? Are you wearing it? Has it become a part of you? Where is your focus going? On nonsense or development? And finally, another meme or question was, what are you going to create or manifest? All good ponderings for the now, designed to improve your future. But pondering with future thinking is an investment for your future. Living in the now only with connections to the past ensures a repeating future of the same. Is that what you desire? to never learn lessons? I wish you good luck with that. Life is just a dream, they say. No, it was just a loop of repeating the same crap over and over again and expecting different results. Think and act different. At the end of the day, it is all about love, the attainment of love, aspiring to love, the embracing of love. To be in love means one has to first to love themselves. Then one has to dance in love, envelop in love, rise in love, and when mixed with another being of higher love, then the sparks of creation flies. It bristles with excitement, joy and happiness. Happiness creates and operates along the golden path. Do you care to join it? The question then remains, will you become and be love, my love, our love, and become part of love for the all? The solution is we all rise in love and take the golden path together and create and manifest our own future. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Bye for now. Good night.